Welcome to the Ritual Renaissance Program's animated guide to the degree Floorwork. We hope this presentation, together with the other Ritual Renaissance materials, will help to increase knowledge and proficiency in this important part of our ritual practice. In the written materials, you will find an illustrated guide detailing every movement of the floorwork, a drill plan focusing on the most challenging parts of the floorwork, handouts for the officers, rehearsal suggestions, and more. Here we see a typical lodge, with all the officers in their respective stations and places. Although the layout and geometry of every lodge room is different, the principles illustrated in the Ritual Renaissance floorwork guides can be adapted to the challenges of any room. The floorwork begins when the worshipful master calls up the masters of ceremony, who rise and come to the sign of fidelity. The master asks them about the preparation of the candidates, and then orders them to the preparation room. The masters of ceremony retrieve their staves, proceed together to the altar, salute, and exit single file through the inner door. Officers should always hold their staves vertically in the left hand, stand upright, and make crisp 90-degree turns whenever possible. Small details such as these make the difference between good floor work and great floor work. In the entered apprentice degree, the secretary or another designated brother joins the masters of ceremony at the altar and exits with them. He asks his questions in the preparation room, re-enters to report, and returns to his place. The next moment arrives when the candidates make an alarm at the inner door. The senior deacon rises, comes to the sign of fidelity, and reports the alarm to the master. Following the master's order, he retrieves his staff and proceeds to the inner door to ascertain the cause of the alarm. The senior master of ceremony responds, and the senior deacon opens the inner door to question the candidates. When he is finished, he closes the door and proceeds west of the altar to report. The master then orders the senior deacon to admit the candidates, and this commences a number of simultaneous movements as the lodge prepares to begin the degree. The conductors move from the sidelines to their designated positions to acquire the candidates. The senior deacon proceeds immediately to the south sideline, faces west, and awaits the arrival of the marshal at his right side. The marshal, holding his baton in the right hand, proceeds west to join the senior deacon. The stewards rise after the marshal passes by, come side by side, and fall in behind the marshal and senior deacon. Once all four officers are in formation, the marshal, who has charge of the processions of the lodge whenever he is on the lodge room floor, leads them to the inner door. All these brothers respond immediately to the master's order, and move to their locations at the same time. This can look complicated, but in fact everyone has only one thing to do. The first significant challenge comes at the inner door, where it can be difficult to maintain a formal atmosphere while four officers get themselves into position. To address this difficulty, the Ritual Renaissance Floorwork Guide recommends that the marshal stop the procession near the junior master of ceremonies chair, so he can direct the officers one at a time to their places. First, he clears some space by directing the senior deacon to a position near the north sideline. Next, he proceeds alone towards the inner door, and stands in the center of the space where the stewards will erect the arch. Turning to face the stewards, the marshal uses his baton to direct them one at a time to their locations. And after ensuring that the stewards are facing front, not towards each other, the marshal directs them to form the arch, takes his place under the arch at the right, and signals the senior deacon to approach the inner door. The senior deacon opens the inner door and directs the candidates to enter. Then comes alongside the marshal under the arch to await the arrival of the masters of ceremony behind them. Meanwhile, in the preparation room, the candidates should be lined up in a single file line on the left. Each candidate's right hand should be resting on the right shoulder of the man in front of him, with the instruction that he should follow along and not let go until someone takes his hand away. If the preparation room is large enough, the masters of ceremony should be side by side. They can either turn their shoulders to pass through the inner door together, or the junior master of ceremony can pass through slightly ahead to take his position on the right. Otherwise, they can line up and enter in single file, in which case the junior master of ceremony should come alongside the senior master of ceremony as soon as the candidate's hand is lifted from his shoulder. Never place the junior master of ceremony at the back of the line with the plan that he will catch up with the senior master of ceremony later. The worshipful master gavels up the lodge as soon as the candidates enter, and the marshal leads the column through the arch, and then takes an immediate right turn to bring the candidates across the west. Each candidate is acquired by his conductor as he clears the arch, and after the last one has passed through, the stewards strike the arch, close the inner door, and join the columns side by side at the rear. After the marshal verifies that every member of the column is in place, all face east for the senior deacon's reception. Notice that the marshal has left plenty of space for additional turns west of the altar. Now we come to the first major difference between the floor work for the 3 degrees. In the second and third degrees, the master strikes the gavel after the senior deacon's reception to seat the lodge and signal the marshal to start the perambulations. In the first degree, however, the master does not gavel here. This is because the candidates must first be brought to the center of the lodge for the benefit of prayer. The marshal right faces the column without waiting for the master's gavel, and heads for the north sideline. As soon as the column turns east, the master strikes his gavel to halt the procession, and orders the candidates to the center of the lodge for prayer. This is another place where the floor work often runs into difficulties because the column has to make 2 turns west of the altar without running out of space. The marshal must be aware of these challenges so he can use his knowledge and good judgment should any problems arise. For example, if the master forgets to gavel as soon as the column turns east, the marshal can stop anyway and remind the master to gavel using silent hand signals. Or, if the marshal can see that the column has stopped too far east, he can create more room for the second turn by making the first turn on a southwest diagonal. And in a worst-case scenario, common sense must prevail over orthodoxy, and the marshal should lead the column to its proper location along any pathway that best maintains the solemnity and decorum of the ritual. Assuming no problems have to be solved, the marshal follows the master's order by turning right and stopping when the candidates are centered at the altar. All face the east, and the conductors help their candidates to kneel on both knees. The master, chaplain, and any additional brothers designated to assist come to a position in front of the candidates for the prayer. After the candidates have been turned over to their conductors, the master returns to the east. Any assisting brothers retire to their places, and the chaplain withdraws to a position west of the altar. In all 3 degrees, the master seats the brethren and starts the perambulations with a strike of his gavel. During the perambulations, the principal officers of the lodge ascertain whether the candidates are properly clothed, and gavel to indicate that the column may pass to the next station. They should complete their inspections and gavel as early as possible, to avoid stopping the perambulations at every turn. If the gavel is not struck by the time the column needs to make its next turn, the marshal halts the procession, and the senior deacon looks to the controlling officer for instructions. These are the only places where the ceremony should be suspended to adjust the candidate's clothing, and no corrections should be made prior to the junior warden's first inspection. After any necessary adjustments are made, the gavel is struck and the perambulation resumes. There is 1 perambulation for the first degree, 2 for the second degree, and 3 perambulations for the third degree. In the second and third degrees, the chaplain follows behind the column on the final perambulation to his position west of the altar. The perambulations end as the column arrives at the junior warden's station, where all continue to face forward for the scripture lesson. Afterward, the chaplain returns to the east, waiting until the column has moved on if there isn't enough room to pass on the south sideline. Following the scripture lesson, the marshal left faces the column and the junior warden proceeds with his examination. Similar examinations follow at the west and the east stations, where the candidates are examined by the senior warden and worshipful master. Note how the marshal leaves plenty of room for a reverse turn in the east. Once the master completes his examination, he orders the candidates back to the west, and the column stops at the altar where the senior deacon communicates the master's order. He does not knock here. The senior warden directs the candidates to face the east, and the marshal leads the column to the west, where all face east. After instruction, the candidates are brought to the altar and positioned under the supervision of the senior deacon. Conductors stand directly behind their candidates, and the senior deacon takes a place near the southwest corner of the altar. As soon as the candidates have cleared enough space, officers can begin to form the west wall of the temple. The west wall is built about halfway between the altar and the west, with the masters of ceremony on the outside, stewards on the inside, and the marshal in the center. Because this moment is often disorganized, the Ritual Renaissance Floorwork Guide recommends that the marshal direct each officer individually to his proper position. As soon as the candidates and conductors have cleared sufficient space, the marshal takes his place in the center of the west wall and turns to direct the officers to their places using his baton. First, the stewards on the inside, then the senior master of ceremony on the south end, and the junior master of ceremony on the north end of the west wall. Once the officers are all facing east in their places, the marshal waits for the master's gavel and prepares to direct the officers in erecting the symbolic temple. After checking to make sure the west wall is fully formed, the senior deacon informs the master that the candidates are in due form. This commences the erection of the symbolic temple, a powerful symbolic space where the candidates take the obligation of the degree and receive its secrets. The deep significance of this important moment will be lost if the floor work is slipshod, tentative, or filled with mistakes, and the officers must therefore give their undivided attention to the marshal and follow his directions, especially the masters of ceremony, who must also maintain visual contact with each other in order to coordinate their movements. To begin, the master gavels 3 times, and the marshal signals the masters of ceremony to proceed to the east. As soon as they pass the south station, the wardens come down to the level and take positions behind each end of the west wall. The masters of ceremony, having reached the east, turn to face the west and wait for the marshal's next signal. Meanwhile, the brethren come down to the level and form rough lines on the north and south sides. As soon as they have filled in sufficiently, the marshal cues the masters of ceremony to lower their staves to a horizontal position and signals them to return. The masters of ceremony proceed west and dress the lines along the way, delineating the north and south walls of the temple with their lowered staves. At the west wall, they return their staves to the regular upright position, face east, and look for their next direction. The marshal again signals the masters of ceremony to proceed east, this time closely followed by the wardens. When they have reached the east wall, all pause. The wardens remain in place, while the masters of ceremony move inward until they have reached a good position for the arch, at which point they turn to face the west. The marshal may also adjust the positioning of the stewards at this time. Once they are in position and facing forward, the marshal signals the masters of ceremony and stewards to form simultaneous arches with their staves, and the wardens take positions between the masters of ceremony in the line of the east wall. The wardens should not break the east wall and disturb the visual imagery of the symbolic temple by standing in front of the arch. The symbolic temple is now properly formed, and ready for the obligation and instruction at the altar. By the end of this work, the conductors have retired to the sidelines, and some additional brothers may be assisting at the altar. As soon as the master orders the candidates to rise, all assisting brothers return to their places in the symbolic temple. And soon thereafter, the master returns to the east himself. He does not gavel here. Rather, the marshal signals the officers to strike the arches and return their staves to the upright position. This commences the breakdown of the symbolic temple, and the wardens lead the way west, followed by the masters of ceremony. The senior warden and masters of ceremony proceed directly to their stations and places in the west. The junior warden steps inward at the west wall, and as soon as the way is clear, leads the remaining officers outside the south wall to their station and places. All remain standing and continue to hold their staves. Now the master seats the lodge, and the senior deacon waits for the brethren to be seated. before leading the candidates through a reverse turn on the south side of the lodge to the junior warden's station, where they demonstrate their possession of the signs and tokens. After a similar demonstration at the senior warden's station, the senior deacon leads the candidates up the north side until they are halted by the master's gavel. In the entered apprentice degree, the candidates face south for the apron presentation, which is performed by the worshipful master or his proxy. In all 3 degrees, the candidates are ordered to the west to learn the proper manner of wearing their aprons. When the instructions are completed, the senior deacon leads the candidates up the north side to the east, where they face the master without coming on the step. Once again, note that the senior deacon has left plenty of space for the turn that is coming up. In the east, the candidates are presented with the working tools of the degree. In the entered apprentice degree, the master also makes a demand. And in either the entered apprentice or master mason degree, there is a Bible presentation. In the entered apprentice degree, the master then orders the candidates to the northeast corner of the lodge, where the senior deacon arranges them to receive the master's admonition. The candidates can be lined up along the north sideline facing west, with the master directly in front of them. Or, if the master prefers to remain in his station, they can be arranged in a diagonal configuration facing the east, with the master standing at the front of the dais. In either case, the most important consideration is to ensure that each candidate has a clear and unobstructed view of the worshipful master. Finally, the master dismisses the candidates, and the senior deacon leads them to the altar to salute, either starting from the northeast corner in the entered apprentice degree, or in the fellowcraft and master mason degrees starting from the east. At the altar, the senior deacon moves over to make room for the masters of ceremony, who retrieve their staves and join the candidates on either side. All come on the step of the degree and salute, except for the senior deacon, who will not be leaving the lodge. The senior deacon then leads the way to the inner door, opening it for the exiting brothers, closing it behind them, and finally returning to his place. This is the end of the first section of the ritual. We hope this animated floorwork guide has increased your appreciation for the positive effect well-performed floorwork can have in the degree work, and has helped you to understand this part of our beautiful Masonic ritual a little bit better. If our presentation has whetted your appetite, you will find plenty of information on the floorwork in the Ritual Renaissance materials.